Elden Ring is so close, kiddos. We're like literally 7 days away from being in its launch month. Ever since the Elden Ring network test, information on the game we started seeing slowed down a bit. And rightfully so, we did just get to play the game for ourselves. I thought the last thing we were gonna get before launch was a launch trailer, but apparently I was wrong. They gave us a whole 45-minute presentation, so that could hold a mix of repeated / new information, and right now it's my job to summarize and do a small little overview for you guys and my dyslexic viewers in the back. Let's not stall anymore and dive right into it, shall we? I'm sorry if I butcher her name, but a woman by the name of Mitsuzu tells us she's our host, along with letting us know that this is a presentation from Bandai and that they're obviously going to talk about Elden Ring. It's crazy that that comes out so casually now. I remember when we were clawing for just a smidget of info, but now look at us. Anywho, she lets us know she's accompanied by Yasuhiro Kaito of FromSoft. She then goes on to let us know that she and Yasuhiro, whom for the sake of not butchering his name all the time I'm gonna call Yasu, will be introducing Elden Ring and showcasing its features in the beginning of this presentation. She also continues this by letting us know at some point in the presentation they'll be answering questions and responding to requests concerning the game, which they have received from users across Asia. They go on to make me feel bad about myself by discussing the Elden Ring network test and how not many people got places to play. You know, because I didn't get to play. Anywho, they're paying attention to player feedback and are taking it into account for the final master version of the game. They're already working on a day 1 patch for the game already, Jesus. Yasu was asked about how Asian fans have felt over Soulsborne titles, and he said he was lucky enough to be invited to events throughout Asia, where he was surprised by the love shown from their Asian customers. He also says it was his first trip around Asia and it was uplifting and wonders to see how many fans they had across the entirety of the region. However, as he was looking forward to attending these events, the pandemic has pretty much forced them to do video presentation, as it's the best they can do. Mitsuzu begins to tell us we hope to cover as many elements of the game as possible, as she then starts off with the trailer of the opening cutscene for the game. Also, one last tidbit, the storyteller I was referring to now has a confirmed name, which is the Snow Witch, and the only thing we know about her is that her tale needs an ending and that the Tarnished might be the only one who is able to provide one. Yasu goes on to tell us the fundamentals of the game, describing it as a robust, content-heavy action RPG centered on the satisfaction of overcoming difficulties and exploring the unknown, coupled with the dark fantasy style we've always known, which allows the game to be grounded in elements from FromSoft that have always been prioritized, while it's trying to provide a brand new experience between Soulsborne titles. They went on to 2 key aspects of the game, the world of the Elden Ring and its game system. Yasu lets us know it's the first title to use an open field design. The scale of Elden Ring is much more grand than any other previous titles. The story takes place in this world and is based on a mythology created for them by George R.R. Martin. Yasu described the collaboration between Miyazaki and George as an unusual division of labor, where George had no influence over the game itself, but instead he wrote them a backstory about the world of Elden Ring, giving details about the events that happened in the distant past of the Elden Ring. Really, the collab was the cooperation of 2 people who acknowledged and admired each other's work, who grew an understanding of what they had to do. George built the setting, Miyazaki put something in it, which ended up being the birth of the most detailed world they have ever created. The story is about the lands between that have fallen into ruin. The protagonist, as we all know, is the Tarnished, living outside of the lands between. The Tarnished seems to be inspired by a vision encouraging them to the lands between and becoming the Elden Lord, where the Tarnished battles against demigods in the quest to restore the Elden Ring. He goes on to tell us that this is the most consumer-friendly story we've received so far, and it's true. We have things like the website and their Twitter constantly dropping bits of lore that are easy for anyone to pick up, really. Also, this time around our characters make these decisions on their own rather than being forced into a fate, because everyone likes real freedom. A broad array of different characters appear during the story, and together they serve to weave a drama that unfolds around the Elden Ring. Yasu goes on to mention that if you like the formula of how they tell stories with allowing fans to piece the story together instead of cutscenes, you'll definitely get way more out of it from Elden Ring. Elden Ring will pretty much have way more items than the Dark Souls series. Adding on to this, This will be an extensive cast of NPCs who also have their own take of the Elden Ring world, with the intention to simplify how all players interpret it along with plenty of fuel for the imagination. They tell us this is their most immersive story yet before telling us about the structure of the game's map. They talk about how this new design approach has been deemed for them open field with a relatively high combat rate before showing us this new clip of the Tarnish on his horse riding up this fallen structure with a straight up samurai feel to the armor. I think this is about as samurai as it gets without Sekiro here, so let's just enjoy this new piece of gameplay while it lasts. Yasu says they're trying to create fields with high gameplay density, while showing us how seamless traversing caves and dungeons can be. Also, things remain true to the Souls nature of most of them not needing to be explored in the first place. Here, I'll sum it up for you. Elden Ring is big Dark Souls map with a bunch of mini Dark Souls map in them. While they show us a new gameplay clip, they tell us that the legacy dungeons are back, and they're basically bigger dungeons among smaller dungeons, and I believe this time around they're required areas of the game. Legacy dungeons will probably feel like a tight, intense version of the linear soul style we've all appreciated in Dark Souls. Like I said earlier, it's basically a Dark Souls map inside a bigger one. By God, are daggers something special to look at in Elden Ring. They just feel right, man. In this clip, you can really see the Tarnish showing off how much variety you can have in different situations. He went from using dual wielding daggers in a power stance and bleeding someone to death to using a bow of his own to using magic. By the way, he crushed an item in his hand to summon this soul dart like spell, so maybe there's tools that harbor magic in them that allow anyone to use it. When he crushed it, he held it up similar to how it was the summoning spirits, so it could be that, or perhaps I'm just reading too much in it and it's just a normal spell. But he hops in the air and quickly snags him with a bow, which is always really cool to see in a Souls game of all games. Yasu tells us that they felt that walking or riding everywhere all the time could be really tedious, so to combat that they put checkpoints in the game which we can teleport to. He tells us this right before he finally discussed the game's actions and systems. As you know, in Sekiro we had a fixed main character. Now, like we're all familiar to, can finally make our own protagonist again. They throw a new bit of gameplay our way with the Tarnish equipped with a set of armor I haven't seen on him just yet, and the weapon in question is a glaive-like weapon that giant golem from the trailer was seen using, and honestly, I'm a fan of this weapon, no lie. They show us the Tarnish in different scenarios before Yasu is asked about his preference with magic and physical weapons. He basically said something along the lines of he used the straight sword a bunch and hands-on weapons like the cleaver from Bloodborne the most. However, he often saw he was more compelled to use magic in Elden Ring, and even players like me who prefer the sword swinging life would even find themselves wanting to use magic more. Point being is that players will find themselves approaching Elden Ring in many different ways. They go into even more detail with spirits, showing us new ones like this bird that has fucking swords on his feet that also spits flames at you, bro. He also lets us know that we can strengthen these spirits and change them to fit the situation you wind up in, which Yasu says that the entire system with spirits is an experience in of itself and that it will probably be heavily enjoyed. I mean, really, who doesn't like drawn aggro? He also says it won't decrease the difficulty of the game dramatically and that there are very welcome presents to Elden Ring. Any new bits of gameplay I promise I'll let you see, like Henry here, who's stealthing through the forest. They're just going over things you already know, such as stealth is very viable. It's no secret that Dark Souls being hard is controversial. Yasu lets those who are concerned about the game's difficulty know that this game won't be like Dark Souls in terms of difficulty, and that there's many ways to avoid conflict. So for those who absolutely refuse to play Dark Souls because of it being hard, good news for you, Elden Ring seems to be trying to baby people because of little babies like you. Then they start going over the spectral steed. This one's pretty quick. Riding a horse can make or break at times because with certain types of enemies in the game, horses can actually put you at an advantage over them. But at the same time, if you find yourself in a close quarter situation, it could be better to get off the horse before you get executed. But any large scale creature or any creature that would make you do a hit and run tactic to it would most likely mean you should use the horse.
ジャンプができたりとか、かなり運動性能の高い馬ですね。広いフィールドっていうものをそうですね、ストレスなく駆け回れる、存在になっているかなと。でもちろん馬に乗りながらの戦闘っていうのもできるようになっています。
馬同士ですか？
馬同士ですね。いわゆる騎乗戦闘みたいなのも馬同士での結構楽しい熱いバトルかなと思います。
They go over online features, and if you played Dark Souls, you already know what's waiting for you in Elden Ring. Troll messages, bloodstains, falling into literally nothing. Invaders, jolly cooperation, all that good stuff. Difference is, due to the nature of it being an open world game, things we've experienced in the linear style life of Dark Souls may have a bigger impact over at Elden Ring. That concludes all the features Yasuhiro could say about his little introduction in the presentation. Now they shift over to asking Yasuhiro some questions that they have received throughout Asia. And let me tell you, man, I love you guys, I love everyone in the Souls community, but ask better questions. There's only like 2 good questions. I'm just playing, guys, but let's get back to it. Here's the first question. Does the game have any repeatable elements? And well, guys, if you know FromSoft, we'll have more than enough reason to play through the game a billion times. But simply put it, it's impossible to reach 100% of the game in your first try due to branching off points. Next question was, are there any special effects that come with the time and weather changes? And he answered this by telling us that they don't change significantly, because it would only create pressure for the player to actually play the game at various times. They felt as if this was stress we could do without, and he also tells us that there's a small percentage of creatures that come out in the night, which is slightly disappointing to me because I wanted every reason to fear the night. I know, I'm weird, but if you have things to avoid or want to just, I don't know, just escape area, like for example, Breath of the Wild, if it's raining, it's most likely gonna lightning, and you definitely just don't want to be around lightning. Lightning's scary. However, the weather and time of day does actually compromise the enemy's field of view, with examples being nighttime and heavy rain. Next question is, will the player be able to move freely across the world map at the start of the game? He tells us that even though most regions won't be accessible from the start, it is possible to travel through a number of different regions, meaning just like Dark Souls 1 when I accidentally walked into the catacombs and then regretted my life. So that simple style of you can wind up in the area designed for later entry still is present in Elden Ring. Hell, you could even skip areas like the Stormveil Castle if you wanted to and just head to a different region altogether. Next question is, how many event scenes will be in Elden Ring, which Yasuhiro answers by saying he assumes the question was referring to NPCs and cutscenes. So he goes on to tell us about this area called the Round Table, where several NPCs can be spoken to that can tie into the game's own overarching story. Also, I know we all guessed this, but this game will have little pieces of story sprinkled throughout the flavor text throughout each of the items of the game. The next question is, will the PS5 have the vibration function implemented? I'm not a PS5 player, but in case any of you PlayStation bros are curious, yes, haptic feedback will be in your controllers. I mean, they did it for Demon Souls, so it wouldn't really make any sense for them to not have it there for Elden Ring. The next question is, how many hours will it take to complete the games? This question always differs from person to person, but we get around a solid 30 hours, which I promptly will take and make around 68 full days. Also, side note, devs have been really focused on making Elden Ring as stress-free as possible. If you didn't notice by everything I said earlier, now we have checkpoints. You can spawn near if you die, and of course you'll be able to pick up your souls, so yeah. Next question is, how much does the network test actually differ from the real game? The answer to this is that very small things have been changed. An example of this is the item flavor text being changed, enemy placements being changed, and adding NPCs to the official game. Meanwhile, the fundamentals of the game remain the same. You'll also now be able to experience customizing your character along with the appearance, and fog walls such as the one from Limgrave that stop players from leaving will no longer be there in the finalized version. I swear to God, these questions are throwing away some of the juicy ones we could get to. They're just asking super obvious stuff like, hey, can I walk in the finalized version? Ask better questions, guys. Regardless, even if you play the network test, it still will be a brand new experience for all of us. The next question is, was it difficult to modify the level design? The biggest challenge for them was the open field design in general. The ability of players being able to jump now means that the level design was adjusted to our newfound mobility. But really, the idea of an open world in general was a challenge for them. Another challenge was filling interactions in the world, because players must not be allowed to get bored, but at the same time, placing a bunch of enemies everywhere would lead to constant fighting, which can and will drain the player. It's a balance that needs to be maintained. The next question is, what is the reason for implementation of elements that significantly affect the gameplay? An example of this is the ability to summon spirit steeds to climb mountains. You know, things that affect the gameplay, like our way of life. And what Yasu had to say was that the horse was actually the biggest change, and that there were two main reasons for it. One was that the horse simply matches the setting of their world, and also gives you the ability to go on a voyage with your horse, which was also a key factor in the creation of this world. The other thing is that horses is a stress-free means of traveling. This is yet another thing to relieve player stress, and was really the entire principle of it. They go on to talk about how they elevated the design of the map to complement the horse before moving on to the last question. And thank God it was something simple. They asked, is the development going smoothly? Which is honestly a good question due to the pandemic/delay. Which Yasu immediately and proudly says yes to, as he reassures us that it will be ready for the intended release and that the team is already working on a day 1 patch. And that really concludes all the questions from the Asian side of the community. We approach the end as they also display us the platforms of the game and also remind us that the collector's edition is only on PlayStation 4 and 5. And then they finally go on to tell you what the contents of the collector's edition is, whilst also mentioning the pre-order bonuses. Lastly, Yasu tells us that FromSoft and him are confident that they made an unforgettable gaming experience and that it will bring us many hours of enjoyment before waving us off into our first gameplay trailer. You know, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. Elden Ring is so close and I've been all over the place with content. Seriously, I've been freaking out. I've been wondering, am I gonna do bad? Am I gonna do good? And then you layer that on top of the fact that this month is really crazy for me, man. You got Dying Light 2 around the corner. I'm potentially heading to Texas any month now, and Elden Ring and my birthday are right next to each other. I mean, what do I even say? Well, it's been a long ride, that's certain. So as a community, thanks for the memes. Thanks for screaming with me at seeing the first trailer, and thank you for watching this video. I'll leave the link to this full presentation in the description for you guys. But please, just have a good night, alright? Eat some biscuits or something.